All right, everyone, we've heard about the complexities of the education system. We've explored a day in the life of an indie studio. We've heard about what challenges the AAA ecosystem can pose for educators, and we've engaged in workshops. One thing that keeps surfacing in those discussions are soft skills. Mastering hard skills is one component, and it's an important one, but if they're not supported by the right soft skills, they're much less valuable. So this panel is going to explore the importance of soft skills further, and I'm happy to welcome Dylan Miklashek from Gameloft, Joey Egger from Toulouse, Keiran Bartlett from SAE Institute, and Ralf Mühlberger from Audacious. Before we start, can I please ask you to introduce yourselves? Keiran, let's start with you.
Thanks, Jens. My name's Keiran Bartlett. I'm a campus manager here at SAE. We build soft skills into our curriculum from day one. It's an incredibly important part of our course, and specifically for employability of the students. So I'm very happy to be talking about it today.
Thank you, Keiran. Joey?
I'm Joey. I'm managing director of a games and family-focused digital company called Toulouse. And yeah, we love to focus on people first. We love focusing on collaboration and helping people understand empathy and context.
Thank you very much. Dylan?
Hi there, my name is Dylan Miklashek. I'm the studio manager for Gameloft Brisbane. We make mobile games predominantly, although we're expanding into everywhere. I think culture is one of the things we're most proud about here at our studio. It's extremely important.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dylan. And last but certainly not least, we have Ralf.
Thank you, Jens. Hi, I'm Ralf Mühlberger. I'm a former researcher and academic and lecturer, and now founder and CEO of Audacious, a Brisbane-based game studio. Our main product is art and roleplay and augmented reality app for tabletop role-playing games. Got to get that in. We've got 12 people on the team, and building a strong culture is absolutely key for us to for us to succeed. We see that as a really key component.
Well, thank you, Ralf, and thank you all. So all of the panelists are also members of IGS Education Working Group, and we've had a chance to discuss the title of this panel beforehand when we were planning all of this. And I originally suggested something along the lines of "No one wants to work with an asshole," but then Dylan remarked how that is somewhat reductionist. It's more than not just being an asshole; it goes way beyond that. So, Dylan, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind when we were talking about that before, was really about enjoying working with people. And it's not just about, hey, we need to get along in order to collaborate effectively. It's more like, I love working with my teammates. And I think one of the examples that I use the most is when you have meetings. So, sometimes you go to meetings, you're just dreading it. You're like, oh, this meeting, it's like a weekly meeting. We used to have them at EA when I worked on FIFA. And it was like, oh, the steering meeting. Oh my God, okay, everybody dreaded it. And it would never go fast enough. And you always left it drained and bummed out, and it basically ruined the rest of your day. And I sort of, after that, I went, why are these meetings like this? Well, it's because we weren't enjoying working together. And when you enjoy working together, you collaborate during those meetings, you support each other, you can still have debates, but they're respectful, they're professional, and they're enjoyable. And at the end of those collaborations, you walk out of those meetings happier and excited and inspired. The purpose of the meeting actually is to be better as a group, and to get on the same page and expand and all this. And when you have a good meeting, you actually have endorphins released, and you kind of leave on a high. So that's what I think, that's an example of a work environment that is highly effective, very successful, and very creative and a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. So, I mean, it does beg the question, how can you, I guess, replicate that with an education environment? I know that you've in the past highlighted, for example, group work, but then also, explained how that can sometimes fall short. Dylan, can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and then maybe we can move to Keiran as someone who's working in education?
Yeah, sure. My vision would be, I know that they have teams and team projects and things like that. And even when I was in university, which was a long time ago, things have changed a lot. But they did sort of push us into, I know one assignment we had as a group, there was 3 of us. And it turned into a nightmare. One of the people on the team decided they didn't really want to play nice. And there was no involvement, though, from the professor to, I guess, teach us about working together better. So there was a lost opportunity. And I think there's a lot more collaboration now in university, a lot more teamwork. So I think it's important, if they aren't already teaching this, to teach them how important it is to work together and enjoy working together despite differences. So yeah, something along that lines.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, Keiran is someone who works in education and whose institute actually, places a huge importance on soft skills. Like, what's your take on that? How is that embodied in what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. Dylan's right in that the team player, the teamwork aspect of it is an incredibly important skill to learn. And most students rally against this. They don't want to do team projects, team assessments as they get through. And all of us have been in that team that you just don't want to be part of. And it tends to come from a lack of soft skills. So teamwork is one of these, but there's actually a whole gamut of things around that make the teamwork work. So at SA we look at transferable skills or soft skills in 6 major areas, and teamwork is just one of those. There's other ones that look at intrapersonal as well as interpersonal skills, cognitive skills, metacognitive skills, practice skills, professional skills, all of this kind of thing. They all roll into actually having that meeting that makes sense and that's fun to be part of, because they all relate to how you express yourself and how other people are going to understand you in your communications. All of our work into transferable or soft skills comes from research and background research from the likes of Van der Hagen, and excuse me if I get that name wrong, or Fourier and Sells, which basically looks at how this is an incredibly important part of learning and should be keystone to the rest of the course. So that's what we do from trimester 1, from day 1. We assess, and I say that in inverted commas, students on their soft skills to make sure that they're improving on these as they go through the course. It's one of these things that's hard to assess and it's hard to get students to practice it, but you can get them to demonstrate the mastery of these skills through practice by making them actually interact in groups, by making them self-assess, by making them reflect, that kind of thing. So that's what we do, and it tends to help in the eventual point where you get into a job interview or in that team meeting or something similar. So.
Yeah, it's cool. If I can just jump in there for a sec, Keiran, that's awesome. One of the things you said at the beginning there I found really interesting is how, sometimes the students sort of resist the sort of team thing. They're, I guess, used to working alone, and it's like, I'm not sure if I want to, it's hard to get in that group and be effective and let down your walls. And I think that's, it's one of those things that when you get out into the real world, you don't get to choose necessarily the people you work with. So it's good. It'd be good for students to start embracing, hey, maybe that's not someone I would hang out with on a regular basis, but it is someone that is respectful, they're professional, and they're good at what they're doing. They've got the right intent. They're trying to learn. They're trying to help. Great, embrace those strengths. But there is a line though as well, where if a person is being unprofessional or disrespectful, then that needs to be addressed. People aren't allowed to do that, be a bully, I guess, in a group.
Yeah. And you find those people who you do have to rein them in. You have to address that behaviour directly, and it's we use an approach where we address positive behaviour in public and negative behaviour in private, in an attempt to encourage students to express that positive behaviour and model it from each other. And the idea being that you'll eventually, I think most students don't like having group work because they've had bad groups and they know what it's like to be constrained by someone who doesn't want to do the work until the very last minute, or someone who doesn't do it at all, or someone who's difficult to communicate with, or something similar. So getting them to practice this regularly and often means they're guaranteed to have a good group, even if the first couple are works in progress, to put it nicely. And therefore, once they've had a good group, they're more likely to be interested in trying that again, to hope they get that good group experience again.
That's great.
If I can add to that as well, in our company, and I'm sure many other games companies, the way technology has evolved, you can't work alone. You have to work in a group. The artists, the engineers have to work together because artists need to know an element of engineering. Engineers need to know an element of art. All the producers, every single person needs to collaborate. So there's no longer a choice for most companies where you can choose to be your own hero, basically, and you have to learn to collaborate, communicate, and really get to understand how and why people how do I say it? How and why people need to work together and collaborate in order to get the best success out of a product.
I think that's a relatively easy lesson for them to learn too. Once they get to a point, for us, towards the end of their course and whatnot, when they're trying to build something that's not manageable by a single person, when it's not a simple assessment, when they're trying to build a whole game that they want to put on their portfolio or something similar, they suddenly realize, there's no way I can do this in the depth that I want to all by myself. So the group work evolves over time as well, and you end up having large groups of programmers working with designers, working with animators, working with sound designers. Even the film guys and the graphic design guys get involved as well, and them all weaving in together so that everyone can use their particular skill set. But an intrinsic part of that is self-reflection, for the student to look inward and be able to say, yeah, I can't do this myself. I need someone else to help me out.
I think from my perspective as well, there's a sense that, we think, having the hard skills, the technical skills is part of being a professional, and then to some degree having the, and it's so important for the soft skills, interaction, that being able to work together is part of being a professional. And there's also some sense that I think professionalism in its very nature is, a soft skill that kind of comes in. That sense of how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a student? Do you see yourself as a noob? Do you see yourself as an expert? Do you see yourself as a professional? There's, these different kind of mental perspectives on it. And I think that's, from my perspective of how we try to engage with people, and how back when I was a games design lecturer and in that space, my focus was always, I'm treating the class as professionals, and that's it. You're not students, you're professionals. You're professionals in training, and we take that when interns come in to work with us in the company. It's it's a very clear sense of you're here as as part of your career. That's it. You're professionals now. And you model it, and I think the really key thing is, we have to model the soft skills much more so than we have to model the technical skills. That as team leaders, as managers, as CEOs, as wherever we engage with, whenever you're working with someone else, you have to model those skills.
Yeah, and when we're modeling them, the reason why I totally agree with that, and the reason why it's so important to model them is because they're almost more important sometimes than the technical skills. Obviously a programmer can't, come in and be the greatest, highest level of emotional intelligence, not be able to program. I don't mean that, but it's if they're an amazing programmer, but don't work very well with people and just alienate them, that's not going to work. So if you have a decent programmer who is amazing at working with other people, and people love working with that individual, they could become a lead. So that's far more powerful in the real world.
100%.
Yeah, very good call. I appreciate the point on the importance of modeling behavior, and I think it also speaks to a point that Keiran raised, namely the notion of introspection and the importance of that, getting to know yourself before you can actually, model your behavior for others. I think one of the challenges that we've discussed this previously is that sometimes the mechanisms that help with this introspection, for example, performance reviews, is something that's done somewhat informally, in particular in smaller companies. Ralf, can you give an example how you go about these things?
Yeah, so I've worked, going back, I've worked from very large universities. I've worked in industry, in other sectors, but on $15 billion projects in companies that were much larger than that. So it's kind of a ridiculous scale. To having our own company, and we have regular meetings. We don't totally formalize it. We don't have big procedural web pages full of information about how to run your performance review, as happened in some other companies where I worked. but we do get together. We make sure that there's some regular get-togethers, and to me, having authentic conversations with staff is really important, and we really aim to do that in meetings, to model it there, and then in the one-to-ones as well. I think similarly, as Keiran said, there's that core issue around address the positives in front of others. If there are learning opportunities, then you address those privately. And from our perspective, we do have a list. In fact, it's kind of funny because it started with taking on interns and wanting to give a bit of feedback to the interns, because it's so time limited. So we actually pulled together effectively like a feedback form, a performance review form, and then we've built on that to actually also utilize the same kind of thing with staff internally as a more structured way. And this is the standard thing as a small company grows and gets a bigger team. I think ultimately the question to me in meetings always starts with, what do you really want to be doing? It's the why are you here question, and are we still helping you get towards where you want to go next? Because if we've diverged so far and nothing you're doing here is actually helping you get where you want to go, then, we've got to sort that out. Maybe, there's something else we can give you. But that really then unfolds. I think it firstly builds the trust. Okay, this company is actually here for me, not just me for the company, in that sense. And then on that, we can work out, cool, well, if you want to get more into management, here are some things that, you might want to learn in terms of leadership development or management skills, or, you're doing this, but it's probably not working the way you're expecting it to. And we approach it that way. We tend to approach soft skills more in terms of what are some behaviors we've observed and some things that happen, and then use those to build on how we can use that to a further development and help grow the staff.
I think, Ralf, you touched on it. The fact is your performance is always being reviewed. Every interaction you have with your colleagues, with your subordinates, with your line managers, it's all a review of your performance. It doesn't have to be that formal once every 6 months a year where you sit down and go through that checklist. And so modeling these behaviors, but actually ingraining them is incredibly important. But that involves everything from the self-review up to the ability to problem solve and everything else. People see that, and we've all worked with that person who, they're a nice person, but God, they just can't solve a problem, or they're terrible under pressure, or they just can't communicate, or something similar. And these are all the soft skills that I think make a big impact, no matter where you end up, at what level of the company, or where you're going to. And that's why it's important for students to get this early, because it affects them from day one.
And the really important thing is that they have a language, like you say. So soft skill evaluation is implicit all the time. It needs to be explicit, because otherwise it'll escalate into just trouble and disaster. And to make something explicit, it's good to have language, to have terms, to have some scaffolds and frameworks. Ultimately, you can go, cool, we actually don't need all of these forms and things to fill in once you've got a team that works really well and that has authentic communication that can raise things. But until you get there, it's really great to have that kind of scaffolding, and so which is why it's so incredibly valuable for education institutions to introduce that language, bring that in, so that when you've got staff come in and you talk to them and go, oh yeah, that's kind of like when we did soft skills and we called that this, and you go, great, it gives you that building blocks, what you can kind of build on and connect with.
Something to reinforce.
Yeah, totally agree with that, which makes me think, like, Keiran, do you guys, maybe you already do this, but just an idea is sort of creating sort of a work environment. So for example, like I was talking about culture, one of the ways that we achieve that is sort of set the expectations, like Ralf, you were saying, explaining the expectations right out of the gate. We've got, our values for the studio.
Yeah.
At the top of the list is trust, honesty, and respect, followed by communication and collaboration. Is that something that when these teams are working together on a project, are they perhaps defining their own values, or maybe creating a little bit of a culture thing like an office, so that they're sort of getting their heads in that space and maybe learning how to work like that? So when they come out of school, it's like, oh yeah, it's not completely like, you know, foreign to them. Like, oh, okay, now I'm working in a big office. Oh, culture, what?
Yeah, not explicitly, not in terms of we ask them to write down their values and act towards them, but there is a level where they get their hands held a lot more as they start the course, and as they move on, things become less and less. You know, there's less of the discussion being led by the person at the front of the room, and more of a you know, you come in for your studio session, for example. Your team will work together, and the facilitator will walk around and talk to every group. You'll have your meetings, but you'll also be so just assessed on the way that you're working together and growing as a group. And the idea being, by that point, we're there to help guide and assess, obviously, the students as they go through, and the groups themselves. But they really have their own norms. They find their own level, basically, and that's built on these values that they may or may not write down and express explicitly, but they're definitely there in the background. And I don't think you get that unless you start to let people go a little bit and let them work on their own and come to their own level, basically. Unfortunately, it also means some groups crash and burn, and that's part of the process. You can get excellent grades with a failing project and a failing group, as long as you're able to use those reflections, use that way of looking at your work, your group, and the whole process, and just say, well, here's why it went wrong, and here's what we do differently going forwards. Again, usually because values have been misaligned, I guess, from the start.
A really great example of that I saw at SAE initially from other lecturers when I was watching, actually, was managing the criteria of the feedback sessions, the critique sessions, in a really structured way. So, you know, giving warm feedback first, you know, what do you like about it? Then the kind of cold feedback, what can be improved, clarify, I can't remember the order of this now, but, you know, and then clarifying questions. So just drilling in, you know, you're not judging this, you're certainly not saying, why didn't you do it like this? And don't phrase your questions as a why didn't you do it like this? But, you know, really learning how to do those things. And I think having those just inherent kind of model expectations of behavior around fundamentally important things that absolutely happen in our company all the time, right? You know, demonstrates there's a reason we do it, and we do it for this, but you don't need to even make that necessarily explicit. It just becomes clear. This is how you give feedback. This is why you do it this way.
And how you
becomes
receive feedback
data
too. Sorry, Joey. That's a metacognitive skill, the ability to receive and learn from criticism without taking it personally.
Yeah.